Throckmorton's Delusion is a podcast comprised of three fools that write words. Each week, we share poems or short stories under a similar theme. This week, it was supposed to be monotony. If you have any feedback or want to say swear words at us, send an email to mattryanThomas@gmail.com.
This is one I wrote a few years back. It was from a book we were working on called Chaos, Order, Body, and Blood. We didn't end up finishing it, but there's some really cool shit in there. In Ramadan, there's like these really long prayers that go on throughout the whole night, called Tarawih. And this is during one of those. Usually I would try to sneak out the masjid and just walk around the parking lot, or up and down Route 59. And I wrote this on one of those nights because I was feeling a certain way, and I just decided to start writing. It's called Man. It's very short, and it goes like this: stapled to a lamp post, spread eagled, crows in the distance against a crimson sky.
You could go.
No, you go. You had more of a coherent thought formed than I did. I was just going to kind of spitball.
First of all, it's so beautifully apocalyptic, and it's, in all honesty, it's so dense. They're very minimalist, but they're so dense, and you could really just see everything that you're trying to convey. That's that one especially is just a work of art.
I'm really glad you like it that much.
I'd kiss you. If I were with you right now, I'd kiss you. It's just so good.
Immediately, my first thought goes to Jesus, spread eagle on the lamppost. But like George was saying with the apocalyptic imagery, taking it into that punishment into the modern era. And I think what brings it forward a lot in my mind is the image of the crows in the distance. Because it's not just Jesus on a lamppost waiting like perfectly, with his six-pack. It feels like they're just waiting for him to die, and with the crimson sky, it's this cycle of life that even he in this apocalyptic era is about to be swallowed by nature, like the rest of us.
Yeah, I actually just added that line with the crows and the crimson sky just now, right before we started recording. I added that last line because I don't know, it felt like decent, I guess, but I wanted to like imply more. And I'm really glad you picked up on that, Matt, because it's the crows, they'll feed on his body, and life will go on even though the sun is setting on his life.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked the title of the poem just being Man, because it's like, it carries this like double meaning where it's just like talking about like, just like a dude, but then also it's like, something we do a lot is just like trailing off and ending a sentence with man. It's just like the last word in a sentence.
That's actually fucking hilarious.
Right?
That's grounding it. That's grounding it in like our world.
Yeah.
Similar to the staples in the lamppost.
You know what? I think if I was wandering through the apocalypse and I saw that, my first word would either be man or oh geez.
Yeah.
So
Gee
willikers.
Is that God's only son?
Is that God's favorite customer?
No. Fuck.
If we ever get to the apocalypse, I'm stapling him to a lamppost.
Me?
No, Father John Misty.
Oh, Josh Tillman.
Josh Tillman. If he comes to my house one night, he doesn't stand a chance.
All right. I think it's time we move on to the next piece.
Oh yeah.
I think it's time.
Mm-hmm. Oh fuck, that's me.
That's you.
It is you. You're the one.
Okay, this one I wrote, I think Early June of this year. It was the midst of quarantine, and I was fresh out of dropping out of school, entirely miserable, but coming off of it. And I think one of the things that I was kind of learning was horrible is that when I was at school, it was filled with these very insecure artists and filmmakers, and so a lot of the conversations I would have with people felt like it was just them trying to justify themselves and the interesting things that they had going in their life. You know, it felt like before you entered into a full conversation, they had to tell you about like the 4 opportunities they had lined up to secure their career. I don't know. I think I was also very pessimistic at the time and didn't have a lot of respect for people, so I may have been condensing conversation to just bring out flaws in people where they weren't really. But either way, this one is called 18, 17, 16 Miles to the Heart of the Issue, or The Desperate Insecurity of Competitive Conversationalists. I knew a man who suffered from chronic embarrassment on account of his premature balding. His son claimed to suffer from facial paralysis, but I doubted him. He had always retorted scowls with, "If you make a face for too long, it'll stick," until he heard it was just a myth, so I thought he may have been trying to prove a point. I knew a man who spent $450 on irony. His best friend watched Taxi Driver every night for a month, and they were the kind of duo to plan heists. I knew a kid who claimed he'd never work in a cubicle, but he also claimed he could kickflip out of a nose slide. Most of these guys will never know it, but on March 16th, 2013, they were all deeply in love with the same woman, who was both famous and dead. They also all thought the Heimlich was a wrestling move. A man who claimed that everyone knew about transhumanism to make the other guy feel stupid and only wore his bell-bottoms around company. An undercover cop that picked a fight with another undercover cop trying to fill his arrest quota. They went out for drinks and told the story for years. He said he had best man potential, but they both knew he was only slightly above average. I knew a short woman whose first thought after the pregnancy test was, "Shit, everyone on the bus is going to think I'm in real dire straits now." A man who set mousetraps around his apartment and claimed it was to prank himself. This is the same guy from earlier, and even his Catholic step-cousin said he took it too far. Thank God I'm normal. I knew a guy who couldn't wait to interrupt someone else's crazy woman at Walmart story with his own and never stopped to wonder if it was the same lady. I knew a guy who laughed at the word penal. I knew a guy who spent hours researching hobbies so he could pretend he had them. He would die for love, he said, or at least do about 3 hours of hard labor. Unfortunately, I'm already the most interesting person I know. That's it.
I remember you showing this to me when you first wrote it, and I had no idea that that was like the backstory behind it. I just thought it was like, I didn't really know what to make of it, but it really pulled me in with like, you know, just the format of like, I knew this kind of person, and like, you know, sort of tying them all together in this little neat little knot of people that think they're special but really they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like, you know, the narrator, seemingly unbeknownst to himself, putting himself in that same box, you know?
Yeah,
That's my favorite thing about it.
that's exactly it. One of the things, because a lot of these flaws that I thought I would notice in other people, was also like entirely critical of myself, because I don't know, before you know other people, you recognize those same flaws in yourself, I think, a lot of the time. And I definitely fell victim to that. And I would take a lot of these stories that people had told me and my friends, and I would spew those out. All the people I knew that had interesting stories, almost like swallowing them whole and kind of stealing their stories as my own. Not claiming they were, but like using it as an extension of my own story, which I thought was almost just as bad.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So this kind of like piece is kind of like an embodiment of that ideal that you had.
Mm-hmm.
I actually really enjoy the piece, and I really enjoy. I like the context, but I really just enjoy this piece and how real it feels. How every character, and this goes for all of your writing. All your characters are very believable. They're very tangible, but at the same time, the way you kind of lay them all out is very fantastical and very surreal. It feels like within each of your stories is a well-defined universe and its complete boundaries, and it's just phenomenal.
Thank you so much. Wow. Dude, I'll kiss you.
This is the episode where we kiss each other.
If we ever get big, I really wanted to request that one of our listeners would paint a picture of you two kissing and me walking in and dropping like a bag of groceries at the ground, entirely surprised.
Okay, but it would be easier for them to paint me and you kissing, because there's that one really good picture of that on like Liz's Instagram.
Very passionate, very passionate.
I think my tongue was in your mouth, like when that picture was taken.
It was such a surprise.
It needed to be real. I had to take it to the new level. That was before I knew you were bi.
Wow, we're just gonna put out all this.
Today's theme is coming out.
Huh?
I guess I can edit that out if you want me to.
I don't know. No, keep it in. It's funny.
That's
Okay.
fucking funny. I mean, this little exchange and that kind of blurb could be something that could be integrated into the story that you just told.
Thanks. Yeah.
You could put like any kind of human exchange within it. And I think that's so cool.
That's very true. Yeah,
It's a very diverse piece.
It's really cool how you're able to like take all these disparate little ideas and tie them into something that's actually like super cohesive. Like I think a big part of like why it feels that way is, the way it's structured as like the narrator just listing off all these exchanges they've had with other people, and I don't know. It's just like the little like. Also, I want to point out that like one of the you mentioned that it's like a slightly modified version of the original piece, and the only difference I could think was like, the beginning the only difference I noticed was in the beginning where he describes those three guys, and the one thing they all had in common wasn't the original one that they all like busted a nut within like 40 seconds of each other.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Why do you change that?
I don't know. I think it kind of went against the grain, and the line always irked me. And I think my problem with it at the end was that the genesis, I guess, of the little story, and what I thought was really interesting was that I don't know. I feel like I was just trying to capture one of those stories that when you meet somebody, they tell you within 5 minutes of conversation. It's the funniest thing or like most interesting part of them that they want you to know. And so I was deliberately trying to undermine that and just be able to put them all in one box in that way, but I felt like it took away from it. It made the narrator an omniscient, and I didn't want that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, because like how would the implication that the narrator would know that was always something that like kind of threw me off when I was reading it at first, because like first is like the initial shock of like, oh, we're talking about ejaculation now, and then and then there's the second like implication that the narrator knows this, and it's like, how does he know that?
Yeah, it was just
I like
kind
that.
of.
I appreciate the change. I think it's a better piece for it.
Thanks. I wrote it today. I got really self-conscious about reading this because I thought that I didn't like it about halfway through today, and so I did like a lot of revisions while walking around Denver.
So you said you wrote this at the beginning of quarantine. Was this when you came back from school at this point?
This was around June, right before I revisited California in school.
All right. So
for the first time.
So obviously you're very well aware of this kind of ideal that you had about people summing themselves up, making themselves seem more interesting. And so did you kind of use it as a way to acknowledge that you have this kind of idea in your head, this kind of I guess maybe a thought trap, if you will? Did you kind of use it as a way to notice it more and try finding your way out of it?
That's a really good way to put it. I think a lot of... Yeah, exactly, honestly. It's really it. A lot of what I've been writing, and there's like a couple different stories that I've scrapped because I've noticed just how pessimistic and hateful towards the characters they were. And so a lot of, I guess, my writing, which has really picked up since the beginning of quarantine, has been about trying to, I guess, create more sympathy and love for these characters, because I used to just hate a lot of the people I was writing. And so, I don't know, it's definitely helped me spot it in a lot more people.
That's awesome. It's a great piece. Can I get the title one more time?
It's called... Here, let me find it. The original title was 18, 17, 16 Miles to the Heart of the Issue, and then the subtitle is Or the Desperate Insecurity of Competitive Conversationalists.
I was gonna ask about the original title.
Yeah. I think my intent, it's been a while since I wrote it. That was the first thing that I wrote down before I started it. I think the initial intent that I had with that was just that we were all right on the edge of understanding it at the time, because I talked to a lot of people about that problem of competitive conversationalists when I was there, but we never really got to the root of it. And I think the root is insecurity or just feeling very threatened by other people, and that compounds in on itself by everybody trying to do that, so you feel like you have to make yourself the most interesting. But we were never able to really fully address it because we were so much in the situation of being in the same mindset, so we were always right off of it, but never fully understanding.
Also, like, adding to that, I feel like that specific problem is much more compounded by the fact that, you know, you were going to an art school, and, you know, art school is for people that are trying to make a living off of their art. And, you know, I feel like that just sort of, I guess, like, breeds a sort of personality type, you know, where you want your art to be interesting, you want to be an interesting person, hence the competitive conversation, you know, it just becomes something that you just become a bit of a caricature of yourself. I feel that's something that I feel like a lot of, I guess, like, people that are trying to get success out of their art, I feel like that's a trap that a lot of people fall into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's perfect. I think we should close that up. I think George should read.
Awesome.
All right. To kind of preface this one, I wrote this one really when this. I feel like a lot of the pieces we write are around the time of the beginning of quarantine or during it, and I wrote this one pretty much in the beginning, around the time where I would have been going back from spring break. And at the time, I was caught up in kind of a bad crowd. I was a very busy guy in a very unfitting situation. But at that point, I was very unfamiliar with a life that I once knew. And that whole idea for me is called the dirt. I felt like I was in this dirt. And a part of the dirt is being trapped within it and not really seeing yourself ever getting out of it. And at some point in that hopelessness, being comfortable with it. So this one's obviously, it's called The Dirt. And it goes like this. I took the night bus across town listening to nothing. I don't stare out the window or look at anything. I convince myself of my own passing and attempt to breathe to convince myself otherwise. I popped my shoulder back in place and went to my friend's court hearing, high, with no reasonable cause. I thought this was the dirt. The dirt is the side of the road with a throbbing pain and a numb head. The dirt is hearing an orgasm while smoking old roaches on your friend's porch. The dirt is fighting the wrong guy and walking home, going up to the 17th floor and laying on the ground. The dirt is 3 old button-ups, a double-wide trailer, and a complimentary bike. That's what it's like. So that's it.
Holy shit.
That
That is intense.
Beautiful. Oh my god.
Oh my fucking dude. Okay, a couple ideas. The first thing, this is before I even started reading it, but, you know, the idea of, like, feeling trapped in this, like, you know, like, shitty lifestyle. I feel like the first thing that it reminded me of was, like, Clipping self-titled album, because that's, like, something that they deal in a lot in that song or that album.
A lot of their lyrics in general, a lot of their song ideas have stuff to deal with that.
Yeah, it especially, like, you know, like, this is inspired by Carbondale, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Carbondale, Illinois.
Yeah, definitely, like, knowing, like, you know, what kind of life you were leading there. I guess that makes me draw the comparison more, just knowing you and hearing you talk about, like, how shit it was there.
I think The Dirt is a great title. I think the repetition of it. I think the fact that it links together all of these, like, very concise but clear images into this I guess not monotonous but identical filth, that you feel like you can't escape. If you're looking down at the ground in a barren field, it's identical. It's all different. It's all speckled uniquely, but it's just this
It's
grime
just
and
dirt.
filth that you can't escape. Yeah, it's the dirt.
I feel like also like analogous to the dirt is like Throckmorton's Delusion itself. Why are you laughing?
I don't know. It's just funny.
What is Throckmorton's Delusion? We don't know what that means yet.
Throckmorton's Delusion is, it's comparable to the dirt. It's basically what I was talking. I mean, George mentioned like comfort, but I feel like Throckmorton's Delusion is lacking in comfort. It's being trapped in an endless cycle of violence with no way out, no end in sight, no hope.
Exactly. I wrote a different poem earlier this week that I was going to share with you guys pertaining to the idea of the dirt. And I swapped it to this one last minute because I felt like it was just more fitting, kind of given what we just kind of talk about on these. And that poem is it's kind of looking back uh, through this concept of the dirt, but with an eye for violence. And I felt like it was a bit too harsh, and I really wanted to go back into this piece and really kind of get into my head with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think.
I liked how this one, like, I mean, I don't think I've read or heard the version you're talking about of the dirt that you decided to not read, but it sounds a lot less mundane than this one, and I feel like that fits more with like what me and Matt were reading.
Yeah, that's when we were kind of talking about the podcast and everything. I decided that it would probably be best to kind of stray away from that one because it was a lot more surreal. I wouldn't say fantastical, but it was a bit more than the dirt.
Okay, it was like gravel.
Mm.
It was like an assortment of dirts.
Yeah.
Mm. I just thought about it a little more, and what I really like about what you guys were saying in the poem itself is that I get this feeling that when violence and this intense misery was just the life that you were leading and the constant feeling you were dealing with, it makes it monotonous and boring in its own way when it should be exciting.
Oh
It's
yeah.
no longer such like a distinctive mark on a day or like a week or a month like it is in, I guess, a normal situation. I don't know. I can remember very clearly like the last fight I was in, which was like 8 years ago. But to have that become normalcy is terrifying. It feels awful.
I think a big part of the normalcy is really just kind of at some point you really go through the motions with it all. Everything gets really get like gray and dark and dirty, and at first you enter it very uncomfortable, and you could enter it excited. I mean, when I was starting to get just kind of involved in a lot of things, there was this weird excitement for it, and a lot of it was because that I was looking for a purpose in any way that I could. But after a while, it stemmed into this fear, and then at one point, exhaustion, and then nothing. And that's the dirt. And I guess the worst part about the dirt is once I got taken out of it so swiftly with quarantine hitting, I felt like I belonged like at that bottom point. I felt like I belonged in the dirt, and I couldn't see myself leading any other life. And that's kind of what the last bar is about, the complimentary trailer and the bike kind of thing. Is that at that point I expected that I would just kind of stay at that point really for the rest of my life.
That's Throckmorton's Delusion. I think that's a great ending.
All right.
That's awesome, man. Also, like one thing I see between your two poems and that was lacking in mine, just sort of a point of comparison, is that both of yours seem to be very much about like interpersonal interactions. Like
Mm-hmm.
the dirt is just vignettes of a narrator's life. These different events, sitting on the bus, attending a court meeting, going up the flight of stairs, beat to shit. And then, I'm just gonna call it competitive conversation. Like that, that one's conversation. You need two parties for that. Whereas mine is just, I guess, a description. I guess there is like the implication of an interaction between the crows and the crucified man, but not really.
Yeah.
That's kind of a
It's
stretch.
solely existence.
Yeah.
It's just total isolation. It's
kind of like a frame as opposed to like a movie, I guess. It's like a picture.
It's like a prophecy of the apocalypse. It's the nightmare that you remember, the last glimpse that you remember when you're waking up.
One other thing that I forgot to bring up, like relating to my poem, is that like sort of like the image I had in my mind when I added that last line right before we started recording was like, George, I don't know if Matt, have you seen Fully Cooley?
No.
It's worth the watch.
George probably knows where I'm going already, but like the TV robot when he gets crucified, there's like the fire and the crows and all that.
Yeah, when he'd get into the cross pose and like rise up a little.
Yeah, I was thinking of that a little bit.
Interesting.
You should watch Fully Cooley, Matt. I think you'd really like it.
I've been watching Cowboy Bebop.
Cowboy Bebop is really good.
Cowboy Bebop is incredible. I can't stop. Dude, it's all free on Adult Swim.
Really?
On adultswim.com?
Yeah,
the sponsor of this episode.
This episode's sponsored by Adult Swim.
This is going to be an Adult Swim show.
It totally would be. Is. You're fucking right.
It's sponsored by Adult Swim.
Yeah, we're sponsored by Adult Swim. Adult Swim. Swim with adults. That's a catchphrase, right?
It's your turn.
Their catchphrase is walk into the locker room, see 3 wrinkly dicks. You're an adult now.
Adult Swim's motto, Adult Swim's slogan is sorry, Link, I can't offer credit.
Oh man.
I think the next time we do one of these, I want to be high for it.